Okay, so I know that we are 1 minute after, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So, thank you so much, first and foremost, for joining us. My name is Jessie Stafford, and I am the Strategic Relationship Coordinator here at AI Futures. So, for those of you that are not familiar with AI Futures, we are a program that is fully funded by the Department of Defense to help them bring in civilian talent through internships, fellowships, scholarships, and full-time opportunities. So if that is something that you want to get more information about, there will be a follow-up email sent after Dennis's talk today to schedule a time with myself or my colleague Markham, who can walk you through what those options are available to you. But for the purpose of this hour, this is Dennis's floor. So he is going to give a talk on strategic competitiveness in technology. He's going to have the floor for a bit, and then we're going to open it up to a question and answers at the end of that. So feel free as you think about it, put those questions kind of like on pause until we get toward the end of the call. So that way it's not a big distraction because he has some really great content, but you can put it in the chat after the fact. And we also do have a raise hand feature. So I'll be moderating what that looks like for everyone going forward. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Dennis.
Well, thanks so much, Jesse. And thanks to all those who are taking their lunch break here to log in to listen to me talk a little bit about what I would call strategic competition or competitiveness in technology. By way of background, I just joined Mantel Technologies here almost 2 months ago now, believe it or not, as their strategic capabilities lead. And prior to this, I had started a firm that focused on strategic competition globally, mostly in the mining and mineral sector, but other economic defense support for economic industries such as technology, innovation, and things like that. Prior to that, I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Africa Affairs Policy. So I was the Pentagon's senior most policymaker for Africa. And in that role, I actually had what we call the pen for the global great power competition strategy throughout the entire geographic combatant commands for the Pentagon, because Africa is what we would call maybe ground zero for great power competition or strategic competition against China, Russia, and some of our other near peer competitors. So and then prior to that, reading through my resume, as I was the DoD Small Business Director. So essentially, I was in charge of making sure that the DoD is easy to do business with for small business, working on subcontracting goals, various things with our interagency to make sure that small businesses have the opportunities to compete in the ecosystem the DoD has. And it was actually a vacant spot for about 5 years previous to my appointment to that position. And we had seen a drop off of something like 70 to 75% of all socioeconomic background businesses doing business with the DoD. So I guess you could say for the last decade or so, most of my work has been sort of in this defense and economic space, with an eye towards national security and competitiveness. And when we talk about strategic competition, sometimes that can get a little bit lost in the sauce. Like, what does that exactly mean? Like, so I will define this as we have strategic and we have tactical. So strategic is kind of like an umbrella, blocks the rain, covers everything as things come down. Whereas tactical would be like your rain boots. You're wearing them on the ground, you're walking through puddles, you're staying dry if you can, and everywhere in between. And what we try to get to when we talk about strategic planning is something in the order of we are strategically predictable, which means our allies and our adversaries know what it is that we're trying to do, and we're operationally unpredictable. So unfortunately, we're kind of the opposite because of the size of our government and our economy and other things. Oftentimes, our adversaries, enemies, allies, frenemies kind of know where we're going to go because we're stuck into budget cycles and things like that, and just get overcome by events, if you will. So, folks like me, spend our time kind of looking at policies, looking at budgets, looking at, current events, what's going on, what's shaping the world. The world is dynamic, it's not static. I mean, even the past few weeks, I mean, the world has changed even more with some of the activities in the Middle East and others that really challenge what it is that we are wanting to do abroad. We like to say in the military, which I should have mentioned, I spent 29 years in the military as well, and I retired last year, mostly special forces, special operations type units, and a lot of unconventional warfare support for a lot of things that you see going on over there. But we always like to say the enemy has a vote too. So even if you have the best plans and you have the best strategies and you have everything perfectly in line, the enemy gets to show up and decide that they can defeat what it is that you're trying to do, even if it's in this terms of a strategic access or strategic denial. So now, again, from a strategic standpoint, looking at everything, I mentioned earlier about the critical minerals and raw materials. That's one of the things I've looked at, focusing and trying to bring in more awareness to, private industry and the public sector, obviously, on where our gaps exist within all of these sorts of innovations that we're going to talk about here a little bit. So, but more to the point here. Again, it is a real pleasure to be here with you. I applaud everybody for taking their time here. I got to admit, when I was in college, I might not have dialed into this. So I'm just going to be fully honest and transparent. So you're high performers already. But I thought when the team here asked me at AI Futures to do a tech talk, that I would maybe gear it towards people like me that may not be great at math or something, some of the other social sciences. Like, where do we fit in this brave new world of technology? Like, nobody's putting me on a rocket and sending me to Mars or whatever. I can't, do hydroponic, vegetable gardens, and maybe I could be out in space in the suit or something or whatever, turning a wrench maybe. But I say that half joking. But I'm a political science guy. I graduated from the Ohio State University in 2013, which is almost 20 years after I graduated from high school. It's like Johnny Cash. I got it one piece at a time, but it didn't cost me a dime. It's a great song if you ever hear it. But I started at Cincinnati in Ohio there, obviously. And the war kicked off in 2001 when I was a senior. And essentially I deployed for several years and then found myself back in town in Columbus, Ohio, and ended up getting a job with the Congresswoman Deborah Price there in Columbus as her military and vets guy, and she was kind enough to let me finish my degree. I had like a few classes left. I'd done the majority of my classwork or coursework at Cincinnati, like I just mentioned, but she allowed me to kind of do a little bit of both, which I'll be forever grateful to her. But so I earned my political science degree and immediately was working in the legislative branch there as well, where I spent the better part of 5 years as a military legislative assistant. And so we talk about strategic planning. You always have to understand like who it is that's in your ecosystem. At least from the DoD standpoint, you have the executive branch, the president, all the agencies, DoD, small business, you name it, all of them. Then you have your legislative, which means, House and Senate. And then obviously your judicial that, has legal oversight of everything, tells us what's legal and what's not. But as part of that planning, like I mentioned earlier, that the political side of things, like knowing how the sausage is made, like putting together what we call the National Defense Authorization Act, which gives all the authorizations for what the DoD does each and every single year to kind of come up with policies, authorize, different spending amounts, clarify, pieces of maybe what the DoD is or is not doing that Congress agrees or disagrees with. And then we work that in partnership with the Senate, who also has their own version of the National Defense Authorization Act. So I think a lot of people on the call probably are tracking some of that as we see the political wranglings each and every single day in Washington. But what fewer people know is kind of how the agencies feed into the budget requests and other things like that. So that's where, for me, as I would have been a three-star equivalent there at the Pentagon, work with our Office of Legislative Affairs to put forward policy ideas and budget requests and other things that take like 2 years to get into the system as far as that process works out. So when you get into looking at big problems, strategic problems, like they're not something that happen overnight, like a big, huge ship with a tiny little rudder. So you kind of have to have people that are constantly thinking, 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years down the road of like, what exactly it is that we're trying to do as a country. Again, being strategically predictable, operationally unpredictable, and having very little guidance and a lot of detractors. It's hard to build coalitions of people that, I like to say I'm one of the founding members of the coalition of the doing, where it's like, hey, we're trying to do something here. You pick the industry, but we have to go in a direction. We have to agree. We have to coordinate. We have to resource. Because we can come up with strategies, but if we don't have resources, we can't execute activities, which then we don't execute strategies. So there's a whole lot there, but I feel like if I could just maybe roll through a handful of the items where, at least for technology, where we're having an eye to within Mantle, AI Futures, and with the DoD, some of those areas of technology and competition are cybersecurity and cyber warfare. That the part of the challenge of being a free society with people that we assume are trying to do the best things, and like would never cheat, would never hack anybody, would never do anything wrong. Fortunately, there are people out there that want to see the world burn, and that is one of the things that we have to be very cognizant of. I mean, there's an old saying: if you could put all your eggs in one basket, but then you have to watch the basket. Well, the further along the technology pipeline we go, the more we have to watch that basket. As an old soldier, I know I'll be reaching 50 years in 2 years now. I can't believe it myself. I know this is a filter. I'm much younger than this, but um, but as we look, as an old soldier like me who grew up without the internet as a Gen X guy, air conditioning in our tent in the field was rolling up the side of it. You might have extra spare batteries, but there was no internet, there was no Ethernet, anything like that. So as I've been able to see in my 3 decades of work in the field, national security, and others, I have been the guy that said, "Hey, I don't like this. Why do we have this? Everybody should use a map and compass or whatever, like an abacus." But I reluctantly realize now that number one, it isn't going anywhere. So what we have to harden, not just from cyber threats, but also external threats like EMPs and other things like that. Making sure that we are physically and cybernetically not able to be hacked or defeated, and our adversaries. There's a great book, what I learned when I was younger that got me first thinking about strategic competition and strategic planning was The Great Butter Battle by Dr. Seuss. If you haven't seen that one, it's fantastic. One comes up with a thing that then another one, the other side comes up with a thing to defeat that one. So that's in a sense competition right there. So cyber is one that, again, because we're trying to get at, we've had introduction of things like the cyber maturation model certificate, some other specialized teams that go into the government pipeline. There's a whole bunch of different NIST standards, and I won't try to acronym that one. Somebody can do that, help me with that one. But just the various standards to get everything up as the best that we possibly can into an unhackable state, and protect our information and whatnot. Then obviously, we have artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is what we're talking about here, which is really just, for the AI futures bit, again, as a political science guy, looking at the policies and where this is going and how much it's taking off with, Chat GPT and some of these other things that they really are very, very good. And the more we learn to integrate them, the better the information is, the better the product queries are that then you can get things out of. It's another thing that's not going away. And the more autonomy that we give, through various vehicles, drones, things like that, to make decisions on the fly, they're just getting better and better. I mean, we've seen, robot dogs are being fielded already, drones that are, basically controlled autonomously, and they learn to react on the battle space. Like, this is stuff that's happening now. It's not just in a 1980s or 90s, bad sci-fi movie with Sylvester Stallone or whatever. Like, these things are actually happening. So back to the cyber, how do you harden them? How do you make sure they don't get hacked? I mean, we've all seen the movies and stuff. I mean, Is there one central belly button point that if the enemy could hack and take over, all of a sudden all of our weapons are turned against us? That's the kind of stuff that keeps people up at night. Then we talk about space technology, another area we try to compete in. Um, you know, not a lot of people know that there's only a few launch spaces around the planet. Like the United States, I believe we have four, depending on who you're asking. But like a place like Africa has 16. So like the actual physical launch window, besides all the survivability in space, the ability to have renewable energy to keep things powered, longevity for human space flight is still something that is, up in the air. Like, how are we going to travel to Mars? How are we going to do these things? But they all kind of dovetail together. So the space launch places, the windows that you can launch from, but also the types of materials that become lighter, the composites, the aluminum alloys, the different things that go into them. They're always evolving, and there are now even companies that can 3D print entire spacecraft. It's an incredible time to be alive. So, you can see that in some of these materials, such as scandium-based aluminums and things like that, like we are already falling behind the Russians and the Chinese and others because we don't have a viable market for these alloys right now, whether it be the raw material, the processing, you name it. And I can go into that in quite a good depth as I've spent a lot of time in this raw material space. Then you have the quantum computing piece, which, again, this is just a day that it's cat and mouse every day. How do you build a better mousetrap? That kind of thing. We're being limited by the production, the amount that we can do. And for those who don't know, I mean, a lot of what makes a computer processing, a chip factory possible is the tectonic plates. You got to look down at the actual geology of where you're placing these things, along with the energy, the logistics, all these things. You can't just build them overnight. Same with gigafactories. That's also a technology that when we get into workforce development that we have a real concern with. We don't really have the scientists, the engineers, the technicians to actually build some of these things. So when we look at how the DoD kind of looks at some of these few problems in these technology areas, the physical piece is left up to the industrial base sustainability office, the IBAS office, that looks at these things, the workforce development. Like, how are we building the next generation of folks working in these industries? Like, are we preparing you properly to go forward into these areas? And we're doing very well, but we still have a long ways to go. But yeah, the quantum computing piece, that goes back into AI and ML and all these other things that just get faster and faster and faster. And while industry is on good pace, some of our adversaries and others, they're a little bit farther ahead of us, unfortunately, in some of these areas, especially the raw material space. Then hypersonic weapons. I don't know if you're following the news in the recent past, but one of our adversaries was able to launch a global missile that nobody knew about till it had already circumnavigated the globe, which is kind of scary when you think about it. But that is a huge area of it's a little bit of a political hot button. Like, why do we have the Missile Defense Agency? Why do we do these things? Because there's some things like a missile strike or something that could be catastrophic to everything we do, and the inability to detect them, the inability to create them. Just like the age-old nuclear weapons race in World War II, where we were rushing to get the bomb, and whoever gets it first, is going to like rule or whatever. That stuff has never gone away. Like, that's kind of how it still is, even though we don't hear about it. And then in the biotechnology world, I mean, we've seen all kinds of leaps and bounds, and the way we're treating cancers, the way we work with mRNA vaccines for the COVID pandemic. We're turning some previously uncurable diseases into basically chronic illnesses and things like that, based on our various investments in these R&D programs, nanotechnologies, things that are really working at a cellular level to get at helping these folks, like I say, get over incurable diseases previously. And then Well, my favorite's rare earths and, and supply chain security, which, and I'll take a brief pause because I've already been rambling for 20 minutes. I do want to have plenty of time for questions and answers. So I'm not sure if they're queuing up, Jesse, or not, but I'm happy to dive into any of these in particular or whatnot. But yeah, the raw materials piece, we have a lot of money being put towards these things, but it's an incredibly difficult industry, mining. You know, copper just got back on the list. It was off our critical minerals list. Nickel just got back on there. But when you talk about batteries and you talk about any kind of advanced technology, you have to have the feedstock, the materials to make these things. And so, you know, working with our partners and allies, especially the Australians and the Canadians, who are probably 40 or 50 years ahead of us in global mining, as well as developing our own resources from the ground to the recycling bit, where a lot of our materials currently, such as like tungsten, like we don't have tungsten in good supply in the United States, but from recycling. So recycling has become critical. So, you know, sometimes people lament like having to separate their trash or do these different things, but like if you donate your old iPhone to Best Buy, they're going to take that and they're going to pull it apart and pull some of those, you know, coltan, you know, cobalt and other fun things in there that are very, very difficult to get at other than a few places on the planet. And that is an area that China almost has complete domination in. The vast majority of these raw materials, whether it be lithiums or yeah, cobalt, tungsten, they come from China. And part of the challenge, again, back to being a policymaker, back to being a social science person like us, is coming up with policies that are going to address these issues long term. You know, reduce, if you will, regulatory burdens that prevent industry from doing things either here in the United States or abroad, or find alternatives like, you know, if a nickel battery, or excuse me, a lithium battery is not going to work, maybe we need to look at, you know, a sodium battery or hydrogen fuel cells or other things like that, which there's alternative technologies based on whatever it is that we have available and what's desirable. So those are some of the things that we have to work at as well. So I think, you know, with that, I don't know, do we have any questions just yet? Or sorry.
Feel free to use the raise hand feature, or you can also submit them into the chat if you don't want to say it out loud. I'm more than happy to read your question for you. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, here we go.
Oh yeah.
Here we go.
Okay.
All right. So first question is from Tara. She said, can you elaborate on how we are using AI to secure our critical supply chains? And then second part, can we use AI to discover second and third tier vulnerabilities?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tara. That is actually something I mentioned already, like Chat GTP. It's a new one, not GPT. Um, those things are about as good as the data that's put into it. So I'm actually part of a few little efforts to kind of look at the Patent and Trade Office is one place where to look at some of the raw materials that are going into next generation 5G, 6G chips and other satellites and space vehicles and electric vehicles and things to kind of not only find out what quantities of things are being requested patents for, but then scrubbing, you know, the planet for where do these things even come from? Like, you know, not a lot of folks know that, you know, you'll have in a mine, you might have a copper, cobalt, gold. You might have a nickel, cobalt, scandium. You might have a niobium, phosphorus, or something like that, where there's multiple materials in one mine, but knowing where to go to get them and what the timing is for them to be able to be accessed. That is an incredible thing and an incredible undertaking to do. But to mix the AI piece into it, there are also geospatial analytics tools that are out there that can actually take readings, temperature readings on mining, you know, smelters, other production facilities to be able to tell like what are they getting out, what are they refining, and how much quantity. So, and if you waved a magic wand to perfectly, in my opinion, use AI and ML to get at the critical supply chains, you would start there, understanding what the needs are based on, future developments, things being patented, where industry is at, and then where the global production is. Like, what do we have enough nickel? Do we have enough copper? Do we have enough of these things being made? But then when another piece, again, I'm glad you asked, Tara, is because a lot of what we're doing to incentivize companies to not use materials from, we have conflict minerals. I mean, I don't know if you're old enough to remember the old Blood Diamond movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, probably 30 years now. But essentially, out of that came some various conflict minerals, conflict diamonds specifically for this one, laws, and a process called the Kimberley process for deconflicting conflict minerals from Congo and other places like that. Well, it has expanded through other Dodd-Frank, Sarbanes-Oxley, and a few others to get at, like, where are the sources of these minerals and where are they coming from? So the point there being, car manufacturers and other commercial and public sector entities are not having to prove out their supply chains, their OEM parts and things like that. Where are they coming from? And I believe the threshold is under 40%. You're eligible for Inflation Reduction Act tax credits and other things like that. But when you swing it to a national security focus, we have a big problem with counterfeit parts, things like that, making them onto aircraft and other defense weaponry or other things that should not have ever made there. But there's not a really good way to track it. We do the best that we can, but certainly AI and ML and some of these other things can kind of dive into those downstream supply chains and count the eaches and see where they're coming from, serial number by serial number, if you will. I think, yeah.
Ready for your next one? Okay, awesome. Thank you, Tara, for that question. The next comes from Preston Cotton. He is asking, you had mentioned before the lack of specialized labor regarding chip R&D and other fields. Can you expand on that or potential issues from it?
Yeah, so that goes into the workforce development side of the house, if you will. And this is exactly what AI Futures is designed to get interest into, this kind of industry, this kind of workforce. I mean, it's it is a challenge. I mean, what does that mean exactly? And again, I know that we try to bring a group together of social science and other folks for this particular call. But when you're talking about, the on-ramp, if you will, like, how do you get plugged in? I think that's multifaceted. I mean, it depends on really, like, what do you want to do in AI? So when you're saying, like for us, for instance, there's me, working on policy, working to kind of align what the various forces across, Navy, Air Force, private sector, the developments that are, coming through the pipeline, making sure that they're identified and funded, and the best innovations kind of crack through, and we're able to integrate them and commercialize them. So there are a number of programs. Like I say, this is one. Not to go into, depends. I'll let Jesse pull the reins back, but there's a program we're working on right now to kind of encourage a broader DoD workforce to get into various careers, kind of like the Reserve Officer Training Corps. It's the Defense Civilian Training Corps that is actively looking to recruit folks like you to get into the pipeline to do a job somewhere within the DoD or the Fourth Estate, which is all the other agencies and whatnot. So those efforts are underway. There's a number of other, like, Office of Personnel Management does a lot of recruiting as well within the DoD space. But at the college and university level, there's numerous different entities that are trying to plug people into pipelines to kind of get them into the careers that we're looking for the next generation. But it's a never-ending issue. People retiring, accessions needing to be a certain number. That's military, that's everywhere, that's always a challenge. So the younger generations that we can get pointed towards these things into high school even, having them understand what that looks like. And for folks like us who may not be a STEM specific background, I don't want to say it's more of a challenge, because I like to say like our skills are kind of multifaceted, or it can cross different work streams depending on what those things are. But then there does have to be like a technical expertise in these things as well. So hopefully with the programs that we're doing and what the industrial base policy office at the DoD is, and the chief digital AI office at the Pentagon is doing, is going to help at least get some interest in it, but also give you an on-ramp into an actual career in the field. I mean, I always tell people, like, I don't know how I ever got a job. Like, every time I look back at whatever job I've gotten in my life, it just kind of worked out that this happened and that happened. But so I think it's access. I think it's network. I think it's, uh, giving you the opportunity to be in front of people that can help mentor you in that path, which is something that I'd like to talk about too, trying to mentor folks coming up, whatever that industry is, finding those opportunities to connect, older and younger generations to do these things. I think they're all, viable. But certainly, I mean, I guess part of all this, our hope is to get the feedback from you all who are in school now, what you're being pushed towards. The various schools out there have different emphasis and on different career paths, and may have more of one and less of the other. But that's the kind of stuff that we really want to hear about, like how it is that we can help you. Like, what are your stumbling blocks from throughout the process? So I don't know if that hits it, but we're trying everything right now, everything.
Awesome. So this is last call to get your questions, and I have 3 queued up here. So if we do run short on time, I'll take down any questions that may go unanswered to see what we can do for you. If you're comfortable with sticking around a couple minutes past, we can always vet that later. But next question is from Elizabeth Cruz. She's asking, what is the U.S. doing to make sure that AI is inclusive?
All right. And I can see you here, Elizabeth.
Raise
I'm looking
hand.
right at you.
Hi, and I had like a
Hey,
section where I wanted to emphasize specifically with
sure.
user experience design. And I say user lightly because that same professor told me that sometimes we look at the user and forget that they're human. And so, yeah, I wanted some insight into that if you have any.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I don't, yeah, I wasn't sure if you meant inclusive, like gender, race, religion, or you mean it specifically the unit. Okay, because I was going to say on that one, if I would have read that without you asking me that, I would have said, well, there are set asides for small business. So I'll answer it too in one way that you didn't even think about, right? So to your answer, yeah. So there are literal jobs called like user experience jobs. Like, how do I experience this when I come to the website? What does this feel like when I show up on the website? Is it warm? Is it cold? Can I click the buttons? Can I, and again, this is something where we on the social science side can really help, is that user experience. I'm trying to remember the exact job title, and one of my buddies, Russ, does it for a company of 1,000 people. But anyway, so that is something that you work with the programmers and the developers to, like, what kind of feel are you trying to have with your website? Like, frankly, Chat GPT is pretty cold. I mean, it's like just like a white page or whatever the color is, cream. I don't know. I'm a little colorblind, and you just type questions in. But as I think as you're starting to see more and more AI, like I have a Whoop band, which is an activity monitor. For some reason, somebody thought it was a good idea to put an AI on this thing. Like, ask it anything. It's like, what am I going to ask my Whoop band? Like, is it going to say, like, why haven't you worked out in 3 weeks or something? I don't want to know what my Whoop band thinks. But that user experience is a huge deal, especially when you're talking about website development or other integration of AI, where it's more intuitive, based upon like you as the individual user. It can remember you when you log on, and like, oh, these are the searches you have. We've had that for a long time, with like Google, it'll remember your search results and it'll integrate or it'll curate a little bit of your content. But this is another level. So that is a definite big deal because I mean, again, back to folks like us who I think are the most people. I mean, not everybody can score perfect on their ACT or SCTs or whatever. You know, that you need an end user to go on there and enjoy the experience and want to keep coming back. You know, so uh, I don't know if that gets is that close to what you're asking, Elizabeth, or you want to drill down into that?
I would like to like share an example, but I also don't want to like cut into other people's time. So like,
Go ahead, share. You got it. You're keyed up.
so I remember being in a hospital and the professor shared the example with us how specifically the like the hand sensors to water fountains did not see weren't recognizing different color skin tones.
Oh wow.
And
Okay.
how that would be how because of user experience taking off, like they were able to like come in and do that. But there's still institutions out there like hospitals that unfortunately like or I don't know, like sometimes they don't see different skin tones, and that's like a part where I'm like, hello, this
Well,
is like hand washing.
I'm gonna blow your mind, Elizabeth. That sounds like a perfect thing for you to take on and do it. I mean, I'm not even joking with you. You've identified a problem, and that is something that are you have what school are you at here?
I'm at DePaul University.
Yeah, I would go to the DePaul University Medical, whatever they call it, and I would say that exact thing because I mean, my hands, believe it or not, they don't work for me either. The I don't know. I think it's because I'm just way too pasty. I don't know what it is, but I'm just saying like that would be a really good one for you to bring up because those are the kind of things. Again, this is what's great about innovation and technology, or like necessity, being the mother of invention. Like I would have never even thought about something like that. You know, same with Band-Aids where they started having different skin tones and things like that. I just, you know what I mean? It's not. It's just I don't even think about that. You know, but that would be a really solid thing. And don't and I would just empower everybody on the call. Like, don't wait for somebody else to do it. Like, you do it. You know, like if you have a problem or you see a problem or a thing that you can fix, I guess that's ultimately what everybody hopes, that people like you, bright, motivated folks with great ideas, will help bring those ideas to the world. You know, you owe it to us, Elizabeth. All right. All right.
Thank you so much for answering my questions and hearing the examples, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're at just over 5 minutes left here, and I know we have some really good questions queued up. So Paul Grindle, let's see here. Yeah, could groups like AI Futures branch out into non-defense areas to help develop the AI, ML, and chip R&D skill base in the country across other industries and build larger countrywide competence in these areas?
Uh, I mean, absolutely. I think that that's kind of always the intent with anything the DoD or government is doing. You know, like I like to break things up into commercial off the shelf things, commercial off the shelf with modifications, then defense unique things, and just like microwaves and Velcro and Tang, that we always hear these examples, cell phones, GPS, they were ultimately commercialized. I think that's kind of the intent behind most of what we're doing, is eventually that will make its way out into these other industries. And yeah, I mean, we could nerd out on like, you know, ag business, like, you know, fertilizer, crops, like the amount of GPS and AI and other things that's making their way just into agriculture to make sure that they're, you know, getting things at the right time, at the right temperature out of the soil, you know, taking the right paths to be more efficient with these huge combines. I mean, there's no industry that cannot at some point benefit and have that integrated. And I really feel like that is kind of where everything is going. It's like, well, that's cool. Just like my Whoop band, how do we slap some AI on that to increase the experience that I have with it? And how can that help get better insights for me that are curated just for me, Dennis Bartow or Elizabeth Cruz or Paul Grindle or whoever? I think that is at least the effort and the intent. And then I should say too, a lot of what we're doing also is engaging with industry, because ultimately industry is going to drive, these innovations. People with good ideas and stuff like that. And that's the challenge for innovation folks, small business folks, others, to make sure we're giving access, and we're also letting folks know that we want to do business with industry. We don't want to be adversarial or anything. So yeah, I definitely think, and I think that is what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Jesse Bowers, if you're still on the call, I just want to make sure that we're answering this question correctly. Is it possible for active duty to be part of the DoD program? Were you speaking specifically to DCTC, or was this something else?
It cuts in and out where I'm at right now, but he was mentioning about the guard being part of the program that y'all were trying to plug in, and I was wondering if active duty could also be part of it. I can understand guard being able to have more access, but I wonder if active duty can have something like that, or if it's like a DSD kind of deal.
Absolutely. I
making
think
any sense
Jesse would
whatsoever.
follow up. All right. I don't see you with your camouflage. It's like a tree talking there. No. Yes, absolutely. I think we would do follow up with you on that one. I mean, there's all kinds of programs. TAP, while you're doing. You're active duty current, or are you in the guard? Or
I'm in active duty right now. I've got like 4 years left.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that would be one we could pull off of here. There's a lot of different programs. This specific thing we're talking about is more geared towards students, like in college, trying to push them towards these different career fields, or bring awareness and whatnot. But we could definitely run that down for you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for your service. You got to get some name
thank you.
tapes on there if you're going to wear that as your outer garment. All right.
Oh, I got my jacket on. It's pretty cold outside up here.
That's the old sergeant me. All right.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks,
All
Jesse.
right. Okay, so we have time for one last question. So I do apologize if we're not able to get to everyone today, but we'll certainly see about getting you an answer in a more personalized approach after the fact. But this one comes from Seth. Considering drafting AI policy is in vogue, I love that usage, with our representatives, Senator Schumer, Senator Hawley, and Governor Newsom, do you feel AI policy writing is being done with a bit of a shotgun approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, yeah, I mean, every person has an AI policy in Congress. I would, or in government. I'm sure they do. But what is it? Is it meaningful? Does it help? I definitely would say that. I would defy you to find one policymaker out there that doesn't have some AI policy, whether it be privacy laws, or some sort of ethics, or what it should do, or whatever. And that's kind of part of what I think is interesting about this time, where just everything is coming at 100 miles an hour, innovations and things like that. But as we start seeing more autonomous driving cars on the road, which we could get into what, and I think it's also defining what does it even mean. So AI, ML, autonomous driving, all these different things. It's like there are a lot of, somebody who's a straight up AI developer, 1,000-pound brain person it's probably like hearing their nails scratch across the chalkboard, hearing me talk about it, because they do this every day. So I think it's just the broader policy is somewhat, but we need to be thoughtful. I mean, ultimately, humans are organic material. Like we operate in a certain way with the world around us, and when you have a little robot delivering sandwiches on a campus that's putting along, and you're just like, well, how do I even deal with this thing? Like, it's blocking me, or it's doing, what I mean? Like, there are things that there's going to obviously be policy as we go, and it definitely is a shotgun, but I don't know what you do about it, and other than have some sort of broad federal laws or whatever, or state laws that kind of dictate like what you can and can't do with AI and things like that. So I definitely think it's shotgun, only because I think every single politician on the planet has some policy towards AI. That's just my hot take on that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dennis, for taking the time today. Greatly appreciate that. If there are any residual questions that come up, feel free to email us aifutures@mantletechnologies.com. And then we can field those over to Dennis if you want to have a more active conversation there. Just as a reminder, AI Futures is a program that is built to help bridge the gap between the Department of Defense and civilian workers to fit them into those job opportunities. So it doesn't matter if you are a freshman in college, there are internships, fellowships, scholarships out there, versus if you're getting ready to graduate this fall or in the spring, there are full-time opportunities in abundance all across the country. So we have a really great way of getting you prepped and ready for that through resume reviews, reaching out to those that we know are readily looking for folks like you to bring in to their workforce. So please do not hesitate to reach out. We will be sending a follow-up email after this call that will have some scheduling options for you, whether you want to go the internship route or those full-time opportunities. So please do that, because you'll get to talk to me or you'll get to talk to Markham. And then as well as just being able to continue within this series. So next Friday, November 3rd, we are going to have another speaker that is going to go into his career in the Department of Defense, and that is with David Breed. So we'll be sending out an invitation for that this Friday, for the following Friday. So be sure to tune into that. But thank you again so much for joining us. Thank you, Dennis, for spending your time with our legal, poli-sci, some STEMs mixed in there too. So letting you all know that there are opportunities out there.
Yeah, it's an honor, and I'm here for you. If you need me, reach out. All right. Good luck, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you.